brand just released their new vases, and this was one that I wanted to recreate. So for this DIY, you're going to need a glass from Dollar Tree and then also one of their new candle holders. This is one I picked up on my last shopping trip. With your two pieces, you're gonna paint these with the color Orange Flambe. I mixed the Orange Flambe with a little bit of baking soda. It's gonna help give me a gritty texture when I paint it onto my items. So I'm gonna add one coat to the glass and the candle holder. Now you're probably gonna have to come back in and add a second coat just to make sure everything's covered. Once that's dry, use E6000 on the top of your candle holder. Place the glass on top, and then once that dries, you can add in your favorite florals. Now here's what it looks like when the piece is put together. What should we put inside? When I was shopping at Hobby Lobby, I came across these gorgeous florals. Of course I get them when they're on sale, but I'm gonna add these to my container. So when you pull your flowers out of the package, the first thing I like to do is put them in my vase and see about how long they are. And that is gonna give you an idea of how far you want to cut down. I know I want to cut probably about 3 inches off of my stem. I err on the side of caution, so I'll cut about 2 inches off just in case I don't cut too much. Okay, let's place them back in. Okay, that's a pretty good length. I love how they're already kind of tapered, really pretty. When I went to my Dollar Tree, I found all of these gorgeous lavender and purple florals. So I picked up 3 different varieties of the lavender. I also got a yellow stem, and then there was a white stem I got, and then those longer flowing cascade flowers I picked up as well because I wanted to put together a wreath. You guys are always requesting a wreath, so that's what we're gonna do today. I'm also picking up a metal wreath form for this project. So the way I wanted this wreath to look is I wanted it to be color blocked. So I took off the labels to all of my different stems, and on each section, I'm going to be putting 7 stems. So the way I did this was I bundled 4 together, and then I'm going to use a zip tie to hold them in place. So I put them on there, zip tied them in place. Now I'm gonna go back later and kind of move them around and add additional hot glue, but I just want to get the placement down in my flowers. So once I did one collection of flowers, I'm going to go to the next, and I made sure to kind of mix in those lighter colored stems so that they kind of fit in well in between my purples. So again, I'm going to do that same technique, gather a bundle, zip tie down, and then go a little bit farther up, gather a bundle, zip tie down. And I'm going to do this process all the way around until I get all of my flowers attached. From there, I flipped it over and I added some hot glue to the back side just to really secure in place where I put those flowers down. And then from there, I'll just flip it over to the front side, move everything around, add additional hot glue, and then from there, I'll hang up this gorgeous wreath. Let me show you how I made this vase. So the last time I was shopping at the thrift store, I came across this clear vase, and I know this shape is really unique. I didn't know what I was gonna do with it at the time, but I went ahead and picked it up. It was $6 at my thrift store. So I cleaned it up, and then I knew I wanted to paint it with more of a gritty texture. We've been seeing all over Pottery Barn's website these really cool textured vases, and they're always really popular. So I knew I wanted to paint this vase so I could put some large stems in it. So I used a color called Campfire Ash, and the way I like to get my paints is I will go to Lowe's or any other store and I'll pick out the colors I want ahead of time and just get a sample paint. So what I'm using is a small sample paint I picked up at Lowe's. I'm gonna mix that with some Epsom salt. Whenever you want a gritty texture, you wanna mix something that's gonna create that gritty texture, like Epsom salt, baking soda is also great as well. But I'm gonna mix those together on a plate and I'm gonna paint it on with a paintbrush. Now I did have to do 2 coats, letting it dry in between each coat, but if you get up close, it just has this really cool texture. Now it's dry now. I wanted to add in some stems. So I went to Hobby Lobby to find some long stems because you guys know we can't find stems this long at Dollar Tree, but thought these were really cool. They have these pretty flowers on it. Now if I put this stem directly in, you're gonna see it's too long. It's not gonna work. I did pick up 3 of these stems, but I'm gonna have to bend and get it the size that I need it to be. Now if they still don't look good, another technique I like to use is actually use a rubber band to put all the stems together. So we'll see if we need to do that. Now the goal with your stems is to have them all kind of upright, but you don't want to make them too short because the length is nice. All right, I think I want to clamp them together. So you can wrap them with a rubber band. I'm gonna use a binder clip and put that down low so you can't see it. It's gonna help your stems stand upright so much better. But just move them around until you're happy with them. It looks better on this side. Last year I did a DIY with a silver gnome and you guys absolutely loved it. So I thought, what if I tried to recreate that with some of Dollar Tree's other figurines? So they had some of these cute items out. So I went ahead and picked up the frog and I used that cement spray paint and just did 2 coats. And that was really easy to do. It took me 5 minutes and here's how it looks. Now let's say there's a project you want to create with this stool, but the base is bigger than what you want to put on top. You're going to have to remove that top portion. And that's what happened for this next project that I wanted to make. So I used my angle grinder to cut where the top portion meets the legs because it's only attached in those 4 corners. And then on the last one, I kind of just pulled it off and it came off really easily, but that took care of removing the top. If you have a piece of furniture with drawers in it, hold on to those drawers because they make really cool vintage tabletops. I had this one side table that I was going to be replacing with something else and it had this gorgeous drawer inside. It looked very vintage, very old, and I kept the drawer and that's what I'm gonna be using to put as the top here. So what you wanna do with your drawer is just clean it up, get all of the dust off of it, and then you're simply going to add E6000 to the top of your legs and then place your drawer on top, let it dry completely, and then you can style it with plants or you can put decorative items around your house. I just love the vintage look to this piece. Now this next project is a little bit out there, but it turned out really well, so I have to show you this DIY. So start by filling up a balloon. So I just blew up a balloon and then I'm going to set it into some kind of dish. I just found a glass container to hold it in place. You're also going to need a set of wood rings. You can get wood rings at Dollar Tree, but I was wanting a variation in size, so I will put the link to the one I bought on Amazon down below. There's so many different sizes you can get with these wood rings. So I started at the top and I put the largest wood ring at the top. Then using a combination of E6000 and hot glue, I put that onto my rings to connect them together. Now, as I was adding these to the balloon, I was worried that the hot glue was going to pop my balloon, which luckily it didn't, but I was also worried about putting too much glue on. So I tried to use as little glue as possible. And I was also trying to make it so there wasn't a lot of space in between my rings, if that makes sense. So I added them on and I tried to make them as level as possible, but I knew this bowl was not going to be perfect because I was using all different kinds of rings. So once I got them all on there, I let this sit overnight. And then the next day, once it was all set, I came back in and this was kind of fun, popped the balloon. And then I pulled off the balloon, and from there I just tried to get any excess glue off of there. I kind of went back and forth whether I should paint it or not. You could probably see more of the glue because I didn't paint it, but I really liked the look of the wood rings. So you'll have to let me know what you think of this sculptural bowl. When I was searching on McGee & Co.'s website, I found these prints and I thought they were gorgeous, these landscape prints, and I wanted to see if I could recreate them with Dollar Tree items. So I picked up 2 frames that were an 8x10 size, and then I really lucked out when I was searching in the canvases because I found these really great landscape prints. I was prepared to paint these, but I thought these would be even better. So look for something similar in the canvas section at Dollar Tree. You're also going to need some gray cardstock for this project. I will link below to the one that I picked up. So start by removing everything so you just have your frames. Next, you're going to use some gold rub and buff because I wanted all of the frames to be a similar color. I didn't really like the gold color of the 8x10 frames, so I'm going to use a little bit of rub and buff and apply it to my frames. Next, I'll get 2 pieces of gray cardstock and I'll cut it down so that they fit perfectly into my frames. Using that little 4x6 template, I'm going to draw on one of my pieces of cardstock. Then I'll lay both of the cardstocks on top of each other. Then using an X-Acto knife, I will cut them both at the same time to ensure that I make them look as identical as possible. From there, I'm going to cut out the canvases. And line them up where I want to put them behind the mats. Then I'll just glue them in place. And then I'll reassemble the frame, put the glass back in, and then I'll put in my mat and picture. And here's how they look styled on a shelf in my home. So in my pantry, I wanted to make an apothecary style jar just for like little items like our candies and our gums. So when I was shopping at Dollar Tree, they have these really nice glass containers that shut really well. So I picked up 3 of those. And then for my labels, I went on Etsy and I found these gorgeous labels that you could print and they were a direct download. So I bought those. I will link to the Etsy labels I bought in the description box, but you just print them out on your printer. I picked 3 of my favorites, cut them out. And then to add them, I'm using the blue Mod Podge because that's a matte finish. I just added a little bit of Mod Podge to my glass jars, placed the labels down, and then added a little bit of Mod Podge over the top. I did go through and take off any excess Mod Podge because I find that sometimes you can kind of see it once it dries. So that helped by removing any excess. So I did that for all 3 of the labels. Here's how they look in my pantry. I just added in some of our favorite candy. Recently I was shopping at Crate & Barrel and I came across this really pretty vase with succulents in it and I knew I could recreate it much more budget friendly. For this DIY, you're gonna need 2 different clear vases. This one is from the thrift store, this one is from Dollar Tree, and I'm gonna use this one as my base. So clean it up really nicely, and then this is going to go down as my base. To attach this one on top, I'm just gonna use a little bit of E6000. I like to put my container on first and figure out where I need to put the glue based on where they line up. I'm seeing that along the edge is where I need to put my glue. I'm gonna place the vase back on top. Now before you move this around, you're gonna wanna let it sit overnight, but I'm gonna go ahead and fill it up. In the Crate & Barrel inspo pick, they use these large white rocks, and at Dollar Tree, they have smaller white rocks, but the larger rocks they have are the natural kind, and I felt like that fit in a little bit better, and they're the ones I like. So I'm gonna add some natural rocks from Dollar Tree to the top vase. Dollar Tree used to only have their succulents out in the spring, but I've been noticing in my store they're keeping them out year round. They must be super popular. So I'm gonna add 3 Dollar Tree succulents. You just wanna make sure if any of them have the clamps on the bottom, you just pull that off. So I was able to recreate that Crate and Barrel piece for under $10. These next containers are my favorite ones that they have out at Dollar Tree, so I definitely recommend picking them up to use them in your bathroom. I'm gonna be showing you how you can do a DIY with 2 of these. I found this veneer at a big box store and I thought, what if I tried to wrap this around these vases? Now, that was a little bit harder than I thought it was gonna be. I cut off a smaller piece and measured out how much I wanted to wrap around. But once I had a piece to wrap around, I added an E6000 to the veneer. And then I wrapped it around, but to hold it until the glue dried, I had to wrap with some painter's tape just to kind of hold it securely. I let that sit for about 24 hours before I removed the tape. Now, if for any reason you have a piece that comes up or doesn't want to stay in place, you could add additional hot glue if you needed to do that. But in the end, I really liked the way the veneer wrapping looked on these containers. I thought these would be perfect to add in cotton balls or Q-tips. This next item I really hope you guys can find at your store. I found these black and white wall decals and I thought they were so cute. I ended up picking up 8 of them. I got 4 in black and 4 in white. I decided with these I wanted to make a tray in that really popular checkered pattern. Now, if you didn't like the checkered pattern, you could do these all in the same color. Like, I think this would look great if all of them were in white. Next, I needed some wood boards to put underneath. Dollar Tree sells these long wood boards. I'm gonna be using 3. So I laid out the wood boards and then I placed the tiles on top in a checkered pattern. I pulled off the first 2 on the left side, and I'm gonna use a combination of E6000 and hot glue to stick them on. The E6000 is going to give me a really strong bond, while that hot glue is going to give me that immediate bond so I can move on with my project. So I'll continue doing this, taking off 2 of them, adding E6000 and hot glue until I get them all glued down. I thought this tray really could use some handles, so I went through my tub. I have this tub in my craft room with all of my handles and knobs, and I found these 2 gold ones. Honestly, I'm not sure where they're from, but you could use any gold knobs for this project or handles. And I'm just going to pull off the screws on the back and I'll E6000 the handles to the top of my tray. Let this dry overnight and you can style it. This would be so great sitting out in your kitchen or your bathroom. Next, I want to show you a fun craft you can do with Dollar Tree tapered candles. So you're going to need 2 of their tapered candles. I went with the white ones. Then you're also going to need some of their colorful candles. Now, really, you could go with any color you want. I went with some of the colors I have in my home, like the beiges and the blues. Next, you're going to light your smaller candles. From there, we are going to use the wax to transfer that and create dots onto our tapered candles. So I was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to use, but I ended up using a bamboo skewer, and I placed the bamboo skewer into the melted wax, and then I transferred it to my tapered candle. Now, when I did this, I was trying to create a dot, and at first first, some of the dots looked perfect. Some I had to do several times, but I wanted them to look very random along my candle. So I started with one color, then I went to the next color, and then just kind of continued to add until I was happy with the appearance. And the wax melt is going to dry almost instantly, so you can keep working on your project. I put these 2 candles in a clear candle holders from Dollar Tree, and here's how they look on my shelf. If your Dollar Tree happens to have a Dollar Tree Plus section, you've probably already seen these $5 planters. They're really large, they're thick, they're gonna be perfect, and I saw this one, picked it up, and thought it'd be great for a DIY. Another item from Dollar Tree you're gonna need for this DIY is a trowel. You're also going to need some spackling. Now, this is something you can pick up at Dollar Tree. I actually have it in a large tub from Lowe's. I find that I use it for a lot of projects, so it's easier for me to get it in a larger tub. Now, what you're gonna do is you're going to start by getting some spackling out on the back side of your trowel. Then you're gonna take your trowel and press it onto the side of your planter, pulling it down to create the shape of a petal. You're gonna start at the top and do a layer all the way around. Now, I did this on those natural lines that are formed in the shape of my planter. After I got all the way around, I came down and I did another layer in between the petals I had created. Now, since this was on an area that was kind of at a point, I wasn't able to do a full petal. So I kind of had these smaller petals in between my larger petals, but I like the way that that looked. Every 1 or 2 times that you create a petal, you're going to need to get more spackling on the back of your knife so that they create a really consistent look. Now, after I did the second layer, I went down to my next layer and continued to add petals until I got to the bottom. Now, as you get to the bottom, you may have to flip your pot upside down and add additional petals. Now, you want to let this dry completely overnight when you're done. When I came back in the next day, I sanded it down a little bit with some sandpaper along the edges. That way, if you have any rough edges or anything that looks like joint compound, it's gonna be completely taken care of with this sandpaper. This is really easy to do, so just do it lightly all around the edges. Now, you can leave it natural. I decided I wanted to paint mine. On the outside, I used a beige texture spray. And then on the inside, I just sprayed it with a light beige color. I wasn't sure if you were going to be able to see this once I put in a plant, but I wanted to make sure that I covered that just because you could see some of that spackling along the top. So once I had everything spray painted, I let that dry and I styled it in my house with a plant that I had from IKEA. So when I was shopping at Dollar Tree and I saw those wall art where I made the tray earlier, I also found these little decorative balls that I thought this might be a really modern looking tray if I could get it to work. So I bought one of those. I also got a dessert plate over in the kitchen section. I E6000 this ball to the bottom of my plate, but because it was going to roll around, I had to use some painter's tape to hold it in place while it was drying. So I added like 3 or 4 different pieces of painter's tape around, and then I brought it up to the top. Now, I did make sure I flipped it over and made sure that it was sitting level before I let it dry. But once I had it exactly where I wanted it, I let it dry overnight. The next day I came back in and I removed the painter's tape. So I found this gorgeous green color that I had gotten a paint sample from. I mixed it with some baking soda and I did 2 coats, starting with the underside, and then I did the top. Let that dry, and then I came back in and did an additional coat of paint. And this tray would be so pretty sitting out maybe by your sink. You could put your jewelry on it, or it would be great sitting out by your kitchen sink next to your soap. So I bought 2 of these frames. I also bought some of their 8x10 frames. I'm gonna remove the backing from all of my frames. And I did want them to fit in with my color scheme, so I'm gonna be using those 2 Rub and Buff colors that I was using earlier, and with my foam brush, I'm just going to wipe those onto my frames. I'll let those dry completely. Next, I wanted to add in some prints that I had picked up off of Amazon. I will link them for you down below if you'd like to use them in your house as well. I'll add in the Amazon prints, then I'll put the original backings back onto my pictures. And you could see how I displayed them in my bathroom on my shelf. Be on the lookout for this other new Anthropologie dupe frame. This one is an oval shape, really pretty. So let's do an organization idea with this frame. Start by removing the backing. Again, let's use those 2 Rub and Buff colors to add in that really pretty tone. Then I'm gonna put the backing back on and I'm gonna use a pen to trace the inside of my frame. I'll pull the backing back off. Then I'm gonna be using some really thick yarn. I wanna cut some pieces that I can put down into where I had just drawn that template. I want the pieces to be glued very tightly together because I want to try to put earrings and rings in between the yarn. So I'm just going to keep layering yarn on tightly with hot glue until I get to the bottom. Once I get to the bottom, I'll just put the backing back onto my frame. I didn't glue it or anything, just put it back on. Next, this is something you can put out in your bathroom to organize your stud earrings or your rings. For this next project, pick up a clear Dollar Tree vase. You're also going to need some rubber bands. Start by taking your rubber bands and you're going to place them around your vase. As you're doing this, you're creating a design that you're going to be spray painting later. So when I'm doing this, I do want to kind of cross the rubber bands over on top of each other, making a fun, interesting pattern. I want to spray paint the inside of my vase. So I'm going to tape up the outside and cover it so that when I spray paint it, I'm not gonna get any spray paint on the outside. I'm gonna go in with a cream color on the inside of my vase. I'll let that dry completely, then I'll pull off the paper on the outside and the tape, and then I'll place that all on the inside, kind of taping around that top edge, making sure that I don't get any spray paint on the inside for this next step. Then for this next step, I wanted to add a blue spray paint to the outside. So I'm gonna need 2 coats of blue spray paint. Let that dry completely. Then comes the fun part. You can remove all of the bags and tape on the inside and then remove your rubber bands and style this with your favorite florals. If you like a vintage look, here's an option you can try. Use one of the white stools and you're going to, again, take off all the plastic. I'm going to remove those black feet at the bottom. Then you want to go to your local thrift store and find a tray that you love, something that really speaks to you. I found this silver tray. I thought it was adorable. And the only criteria that you need to have is the tray needs to be wider than your stool for this project. But it's so easy to put this together. All you have to do is add a little bit of E6000 to the top of your tray and then place your tray on top. Let it dry for 24 hours and then the next day you can style it in your home. It makes a great side table. The next time you're shopping at Dollar Tree, keep an eye out for these wood boxes. They have these really pretty fronts to them. There was 3 different varieties. You guys will have to let me know down in the comments which one you liked the best. My favorite was the scallop box, but these wood boxes are great for adding in as little trinket boxes around your house. With the scallop one, I added in some dark stain to it. To put the stain on, I just used a paper towel and wiped the stain on. Because I'm using a paper towel, as I'm adding the stain, I'm also removing any excess stain, so it's kind of like a 2-for-1 step. But I put stain on the entire box and I let it dry. Here's how it looks in my decor. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Comment the word of the day, which is DIY. If you've been watching me DIY for a while, you know I love to get inspiration from high-end sites. When I was looking on Studio McGee's site, I found this gorgeous metal candle holder, and I thought this we could definitely recreate with Dollar Tree items. So the first thing you're gonna need to pick up is a plate. I felt like the smaller plates would be best, and I wanted to find one as flat as possible. So I'm gonna be using this white plate. And then you're also going to need one of Dollar Tree's clear glass vases. So to start off, we need to paint the bottom, and I wanted this to have a metal appearance because in the Studio McGee one, it definitely looks metalled. It has that hammered finish. So to achieve this look, I started by painting it with a base of black. Typically in most of our projects, when we're going to be layering, you want to start off with a base color, and black seems to be a great base color for a hammered finish. So I did one solid coat on the back side and the front side, and then I let that dry completely. Next, I'm going to try to add that hammered finish onto the plate. So I pulled out 4 colors from acrylic paints that I had. I was going for silvers, golds, I wanted some whites, and I also went with like an espresso brown color. So I'm gonna put those colors out, and then using a paper towel, I'm gonna take a paper towel and crumple it up. I'm gonna dip the paper towel into my paint, and then I'll dab it on my craft table to get off any excess. I want very little paint on my paper towel for this next step. Then I'm gonna start dabbing the various paint colors onto my plate. So I'll put on the gold, I'll add the silver, then I'll come in with the white. Now at this point, you really need to start blending. So to blend, I want to start bringing back in some of those dark colors. So next I'm going to be adding in that espresso brown color, and that's going to tone down the colors and kind of mix them together really well. I took a step back and they weren't blending as well as I wanted them to, so I added a little bit of black, which was my original color, just to tone down the colors a little bit. Once I was happy with it, I let it dry completely. Then I used some E6000 on the bottom of my glass vase, placed it on my plate, and when that was dry, I just added in a candle, and you guys will have to let me know how well you think my dupe turned out. Let's make a bathroom towel holder. You're going to need to pick up 3 of these hooks from Dollar Tree. You're also going to need a wood board. I have to admit, this one was a scrap board that I already had. It's about a 3.5-inch wide board, but really use what you have on hand. I'm gonna be adding 2 colors of Rub and Buff to my hooks. And I'll also be staining the board with 2 colors. I'm gonna be using Natural Stain and Early American. I'll just wipe that onto my board and remove any excess. Once everything has a chance to dry, you can assemble. So I decided to only use 5 hooks for this project. With my 2 end hooks, I'm gonna put them about 4 inches from the edge, and then I'm gonna space the other 3 about 10 inches apart. That way I have a nice amount of room. I had a long wall that I could hang this on. And then I'll just use the screws that were provided and my drill, and I'll screw the hooks into the board. Now to make them blend in a little bit better, I used those foam brushes to add a little bit of Rub and Buff to the top of my screws. And here's how it looks hanging on my wall. Last year, I created some nautical chain links, and I wanted to try to do it a little bit different this year. So I have found the best product to use for this is the Crayola Model Magic, and I'm gonna be using 2 different packages that are 8 ounces in size. If you buy the big container, it has 4 packages inside, so we're just gonna be using 2 to make 2 links. So start by taking your model clay out of the package, and then you're just going to roll it up. I rolled it out as evenly as possible until it got to a long tube size. I was bringing the edges in to see if it was like the right size that I wanted it to be. Once I was happy with the length, I created another one. So I rolled another piece of the Model Magic out and I made them the exact same size. Next, I cut off one of the ends with one of my Cricut cutters so that it was nice and straight. And then to attach them, I used a little bit of hot glue to hold one of them in place. Now I wanted them to be linked together, so I just placed the tube through one of the others and hot glued the other one in place. Now I let this sit overnight, and one of them I kind of propped up as it was sitting to dry so that they weren't sitting completely flat. And then the next day I used some yarn that I had in my stash, and I wanted to cover up where those two ends met. And I'm gonna start by hot gluing it on the back side, and I'll wrap it around so it covers. I did about 1.5 inch thickness on the yarn. So I did that on one side. I also did it on the other side where I closed up the chain. Model Magic actually takes a while to dry and set up, so I let it sit out another night, and here's how it looks in my home. Let me show you how to make a bench with these two stools. So start by taking the plastic off of the bottom of your stools. There's also these little rubber pieces at the bottom, and I'm going to pull those off because I want it to be a nice clean look. You can use whatever color base you wanted. I wanted to go with the white because it matched my living room a little bit better. Next, you're going to need a board. Now, you may have to go to Lowe's or the Restore to get a board. I did a project in my office where I used butcher block to create a shelf as well as a desk, and I had a bunch of leftover butcher block. And I had this one piece that was honestly the perfect size for this project. It was a little bit long, so I just marked where I wanted to cut it down, making sure that it fit on the back of my couch. And then using my miter saw, I cut on either side to create the length that I needed. The next step I did was to stain this with the color Early American. And to stain this board, I just used a paper towel to wipe on the stain, and then the paper towel also worked to remove any excess stain. I let this dry overnight. You could add a sealer to it, but I feel like the butcher block really does a great job of soaking up any stain, so I did not. And then to put it in my living room, I just placed the two stools behind my couch. Then I'll put the butcher block board on top, adjust your stools so that they're at the right angle for you, and then you can finish it off with a throw and some pillows. You want to go to your local Dollar Tree and look for some of those bathroom essentials, like a soap container, something to hold your toothbrush, a soap dish, and I also found a planter that I thought would work great for a trash can. For my soap dish, I added 3 large wooden beads to the bottom with E6000 and hot glue. I removed the pump from the soap dispenser. With all 4 items, I sprayed them with 2 coats of a white matte spray paint. Next, I wanted to give them a marble appearance. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you've probably seen me do this with like a gray color, but I wanted to try to do it with some of the warmer colors. So to do this technique, you're going to need a bucket of water. I like to use a storage bin, and I just fill it halfway up with water. I'm gonna be using the color Warm Caramel as my first color, and I'm just gonna spray it lightly on the top of the water. I'm gonna take one of my items, dip it straight down in the water, and pull it straight back up. I'm gonna repeat this step for all 4 items, and as you can see, whatever pattern you have in the water, you're able to get on your item. I'm also going to do this with the color Nutmeg because I was really wanting like a textured appearance and a multicolored look. Another thing I did was I tried the color black, which I did not like. That was too dark for me, and I'll show you how you can fix that mistake. So one thing you can do is once that dries, you can add on additional paint to kind of tone it down or give it a different look. So I added on a cream paint. I also added on like a sea foam gray color, and that kind of toned it down and made the colors blend together better. You can also seal all these pieces with a clear matte spray paint. Now, a great tray idea is this wood canvas that they have out at Dollar Tree. Love the way this looks, but if you flip it over, it looks like a tray. So you could stain this whatever color works for you. I started with the color Natural, but I decided I wanted a little bit more warmth. So I went in with the color Early American. I just wipe the stain on, and then I pull off the excess with a paper towel. Once that dries, you can add all of your pieces to your tray. Now for this next DIY, I actually have a piece from IKEA as well as Dollar Tree. But IKEA has a lot of different light fixtures that are really affordable that you can use in a bunch of different DIYs. I picked up this wire IKEA lamp shade that I'm gonna use in this next project. I also picked up a clear vase from Dollar Tree. So with my clear vase, I'm gonna spray paint it with 2 coats of a matte black spray paint. Then the cool thing about this vase is it actually fits down into that wire lampshade. So I'm gonna put a little bit of E6000 on the bottom of the vase, and then I'm gonna set it into my lampshade. I'll let that dry completely overnight. Then you can style it as a really cool and funky vase. You can put in any florals that you like. Another item I found was this wood scallop tray. These are so cute, and I feel like scallop is definitely in this year at Dollar Tree. For this next project, you're gonna need 2 of the wood scallop trays. You're also going to need these little adorable glass candle holders. I bought 3 of these. I wanted the scallop trays to be a lighter color, so I'm gonna be using this sample paint color that I had, and I'm gonna paint 2 coats on my trays. And I'm going to be having them flipped over so you can see the bottom side. So I made sure that the bottom side was what I painted. Once I had that painted, I'm gonna come back in with Rub and Buff and a foam brush, and I'm going to lightly put the gold Rub and Buff around the edges of the scallop. I felt like this would help that detail really stand out, that scallop border. Now, once all my painting was done, I'm going to assemble 2 of the glass containers on top of each other with some E6000. And then I'll place 1 of the wood trays on top of that glass container. And I'll do the same thing with 1 of the glass candle holders. I'll put E6000 on the top of it and put on my other wood scallop tray. Now, if you haven't guessed, I'm making candle holders. Once these dry, I put them with some white candles that I already had. I wanted to see if there was a way that I could turn one of these plant stools into an ottoman. I know it's a little far-fetched and I wasn't sure if it was going to work out, but let me walk you through how I did this. So I started with a plant stool, and then I also picked up a roll of foam from Walmart. And then I'm going to need some fabric to wrap with it. So you can go to Joann's, get any kind of fabric you want. I went with a brown Sherpa fabric just because that's very in right now, that Sherpa material, and brown is a very popular color right now. So the first thing I did was lay out my foam because my thought was I'm going to wrap foam around the entire piece. So I measured it out to where I would have foam wrapping around the entire body of my stool and maybe going over about 2 or 3 inches. The next thing I did was measure out a tabletop. So the way that I did this was just to turn my stool upside down, and using a Sharpie, I just marked where I wanted to cut that out so that it was the right size to fit on top of my stool. I marked where I needed to cut, and I cut out the foam. So I'm going to wrap the foam around, hot gluing it to the legs of my stool. Now I did kind of mess up because I hot glued the foam piece to the top of my stool, and then I realized I probably need to cover it first before I do that. So I had to pull that up, but it wasn't on there very long, so it wasn't a big deal. Next, I wanted to wrap the outside layer with the Sherpa. So I kind of did the same method. I made sure I cut my fabric, so I had about 2 inches extra on each side. That way I could wrap it around and hot glue it on both sides, the top and the bottom. Now where the fabric met up, I did fold it under and I hot glued that edge. If I probably could go back and redo this, I probably wouldn't have put the foam on top of each other. It made it a little bit bulkier on that side, but I'm hoping that that'll kind of be the back side to my project. Hot gluing the top all the way around, trying to make it as secure as possible. If I saw an area that was coming up, I just added more hot glue. And then I repeated those same steps by hot gluing it around the bottom edge. Now with my foam circle, I kind of did the same method as well. I put it down on a piece of fabric and I measured about 1.5 inches wider than the foam, cut out my circle, and then I went around and hot glued it to the foam and making sure that it was as flat as possible on the front. And then to attach it, I just added some hot glue to the top of the stool and placed it on top. And here is my affordable ottoman. For this next DIY, you're just going to need a clear glass vase from Dollar Tree and a roll of wood veneer from a store like Lowe's or Home Depot. You're also gonna need some E6000 and clamps. Now this is a project that's not hard, but you do have to allow a little bit of dry time in between. So start by cutting a piece of veneer that's going to fit around the top edge of your glass container. Then you can add on some E6000 to the back of the veneer. And then using one of your Dollar Tree clamps, clamp it in place. I did let this dry for several hours before I moved on to my next step. Next, I wanted to create some veneer pieces that would start at the top and go all the way to the underside of my piece. I measured out a piece of veneer that started at the top that went about 2 inches longer than my vase. I'm gonna cut 9 veneer pieces that are all the same length. Now you're gonna need a few clamps. That's why I recommend these pink ones. You can get them in the Crafter's Square at Dollar Tree. Put a little E6000 on the back of one of your veneer pieces and line it up on the top of your container and then add a clamp to hold it in place. Do this all the way around, making your spacing about as even as possible, but don't worry if it's not perfect. Now, once this has a chance to dry, you can attach the pieces to the bottom. I used hot glue for this. You could use E6000 if you wanted to, but I wanted all of my wood veneer pieces to stick out a little bit. So I tried to make how much they were sticking out consistent all the way around. Now, once I had them all glued to the bottom, I realized that it wasn't steady on top. So I found this wood ring from Dollar Tree and I'm gonna place some hot glue on the top of that and place my vase onto the ring. Let that dry and then you can add a candle, and here's how it turned out. You guys know that I do Amazon live streams and I look at a lot of different items on Amazon. And one of the items I saw were these really pretty containers by a brand called The Creative Co-op. And I love the way they look, but the price was a little bit high. So I thought, what if I could recreate these containers? So I was shopping at Dollar General and I found these glass containers with wood lids. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to try to recreate these jars. So I started on the lids, and with these, I just sanded them down. They were kind of a lighter wood, but in the original, they were a much darker wood. So I wanted to stain these. So after I sanded down the lids, I used a dark coat of stain. I put it on with a foam brush and then wiped off any excess. Now, I did feel like they weren't dark enough, so I did come back a day later and add a little bit more stain just to kind of darken the lids up. Now with the clear containers, this is when I had to be a little creative with my spray paint. So I have a cement spray paint that I used as the base. So I did 2 coats on my jars with the cement spray paint. After that dried, if you look at the picture, they had some creams and black on the jars. So I started with my black. I went in with this textured spray paint because I feel like that gives you more of like that speckled look. I added the black just sparingly. So I just kind of sprayed it until I was happy with it. Then I came in with that white cream speckled paint and just put a little of that onto the containers. Let this dry completely, and here's how the jars turned out. Now they're not an exact dupe, but I love the way they look. If you've been shopping at Dollar Tree, you've probably noticed all the new planters that they have out. So I found this planter at Dollar Tree and I wanted to dress it up a bit. So I'm gonna be adding some dowel rods to the top of my planter. So I measured out how long I wanted my dowel rods to be. And then I cut them with my hacksaw. Now you can cut all of these with a hacksaw, or you can use a miter saw. It's going to make your job a lot easier. Once you have all of your dowel rods cut up, all you're gonna do is hot glue them to the top part of your planter, making sure that they're all level all the way around. Now, as you're going around your vase, the vase is angled a bit, so you are going to have to leave some gaps just to make sure that all of your dowel rods are as straight as possible. The next step is to spray paint this. I decided to go with a white color. So I'm gonna do 2 coats of spray paint starting on the bottom side. I'll let that dry and then flip it over and spray paint on the other side. You can use this as a planter. I put in one of my favorite household plants. I am going to make a plant stool. I'll be using one of the black stools. Now to make a topper for this stool, I wanted to use one of my favorite products, which is Quikrete, to create a table base. Now, the hardest part I think for this project was finding something that I could use as the structure for my table. I needed a round tabletop that was bigger than the stool. So you're not gonna believe what I used. I used an oil pan from Walmart. It ended up being the perfect size to create a tabletop. So I'm going to be using a Quikrete. You can get this at any big box store, and you're going to mix the Quikrete with water until you get a pudding-like consistency. Now I would recommend mixing the Quikrete in a separate container. So I'm going to mix it up and then I will pour it into my pan. Once you have it poured in, you just want to shake it and kind of tap it to get it nice and level and so that there's no air bubbles in your Quikrete. Continue adding it until you have the thickness that you desire on your tabletop. Once you're happy with it, you're going to take your black table and put it down into the Quikrete. Let this dry for at least 24 hours. Now the next day I came back in and I wanted to take it out of the mold. I was seeing that it was completely dry around the edges. So I started by pulling off the pan around the edges, and then I lifted up on the stool and it completely came off. It was not connected in any way. So I'll have to glue that back together, but it wasn't a big deal. After I did this, I noticed that there was some circles on the top where the pan was. So I just used a little bit of sandpaper to sand down any imperfections. Now to attach my stool, put some E6000 on the top of the stool, and then I'll place it on the Quikrete tabletop. Let this dry overnight, and this makes a perfect stand to set out with a plant on top. I found these silver metallic bowls on Studio McGee's website, and metallic colors seem to be very much in right now. So I wanted to recreate that look. So at Dollar Tree, I got just 3 of their regular white bowls. They've had these now for a while. I also picked up some of their candles and some black rocks. I'm gonna spray paint each of the bowls with a silver metallic color. After that dries, I'm gonna use a little bit of black rub and buff and run that along the edges of my bowls. On the inside of my bowl, I'm gonna fill it up with those black rocks, and then I'll place the candles inside. I think this would look great sitting out in your living room. It would also make a great centerpiece for your table. Anthropologie has these really cool jewelry dishes on their website. They may even be candle holders, but I thought it was neat enough that I wanted to try to recreate it. So I bought one of these clear candle holders at Dollar Tree. You've probably seen them before. They've had them out for years. I also got some gold leaf. Now, sometimes you can find gold leaf in the craft section, but I wasn't able to find it, so I did order mine. I'll link to it below. So I started this project by just adding some matte Mod Podge with a foam brush on my entire clear dish. Then I just took that gold leaf and added it to almost like 1/3 of it. And with gold leaf, you just want to press it down and it'll hold in place. Once that dried completely, I did come back and do a second coat of the Mod Podge, putting it on the clear side first, and then I covered over the gold leaf. Once it dries completely, you can use this as a dish to hold your jewelry. I just love creating little dishes like this. I found these new picture frames and I loved the cutout detail on them. So with one of them, I wanted to make a picture frame to set out in my living room. I started by going down about 1/3 of the way, and I'm gonna be using painter's tape on one side to tape it off. Next, I'm gonna be using black paint, and I'm gonna paint the lower edge with a foam brush. I didn't go into any of like the inner areas. I just did a surface level painting, and then I also added my paint to the edge. I did 2 coats of this. And once I had the second coat done, I pulled off the painter's tape. And once it was completely dry, I found a picture of me and my husband that I wanted to put in the frame. And then using that existing piece, I just marked around where I needed to cut. I cut out the picture and added it back in the frame. And here's how it looks in my living room. Dollar Tree is always getting some new fun containers over in the kitchen section. I happened to come across these and I really liked the iridescent look to them. I thought they'd be perfect to hold some smaller items in my bathroom. The tops of these were rose gold, and I was wanting more of a deep brassy gold. So whenever I'm doing these bathroom videos, I like everything to be really cohesive. So I picked out 2 of my rub and buff colors that I'm gonna be using for all of my projects. Using a foam brush, I'm gonna add those rub and buff colors to my lids. once that dries, I'm gonna drill 2 holes into the top of my lid. I'm gonna be using this faux leather string to act as a pull on the top. So I'll just lace it through and then lace it through my other hole. I'll double knot it on the back. And then I'll repeat those steps on the other lid. Cut off any excess. From here, you can put your items in here. I'm gonna be filling mine up with bath salt. And then put the lids on. And here's how they look. All right, this next DIY is a way that you can get a spa-like experience at home. What you're going to need is a pack of decking from IKEA. Now you're only gonna need 6 tiles to create this mat, and you wanna pull out 6 tiles. And you're going to start in the top left corner, and then you're gonna attach the one next to it, making sure you have the tiles going the exact same way. They're a click and lock system, so all you have to do is press them together. If they're a little stubborn, you can come in with a hammer and that will help to hold them in place. But I put 3 across the top and then 3 across the bottom. Now you may be wondering, okay, what am I gonna do with that black border on the side? What I did was I took them outside, and with my oscillating saw, I just got the excess off around the edges. It was pretty easy to do. And then you can use this in your bathroom as a nice spa bath mat. Every time I head to Dollar Tree, I find something new in the crafters square. I found these wood sticks in a bag and I was like, these are so cool. Let's do something with them. So I think what I wanna do is create a tray. So I got one of my large craft sticks. You can pick these up at Walmart. So to create my tray, I'm gonna add hot glue to the front part of my craft stick. I'm gonna start by staggering the pieces on the top. They're just being attached with the hot glue. I'll continue down my craft stick, adding in hot glue and staggering my pieces until I get to the very end of the craft stick. Now to put on top of these, I found these new clear containers at Dollar Tree. These are great. I'm gonna add in some black rocks. I feel like black rocks have a great high-end look. So I'll put those in the bottom of my clear container. I'm gonna add in a candle I got in a 4-pack from Walmart, and I'll place those on my tray. Here's a look at how those turned out. I think you can save so much money by adding a beautiful vase into your decor. So I found these 2 different sizes of vases at Dollar Tree. They're in the $1.25 section. I'm gonna spray these one time with the 2 colors I showed you, the warm caramel and the nutmeg. Once that dries, I'll flip them back over and give them another coat of spray paint. Next, to give some texture and dimension to these vases, I'm gonna be using plaster of Paris. I just put a little bit into a disposable bowl, added a little bit of water, and then I'm gonna simply take a paper towel, dab it into the wet plaster of Paris, and then I'm going to dab it all over my vases. Now you can do as much or as little of this as you like to really get that aged look you're going for. Let that dry completely. Now, while that's drying, I decided to create some flower frogs to put on the top of my vases. Now, these are a great idea to help you with sectioning out your stems. So you're gonna need some air dry clay, and you're going to roll it out. Next, take one of your vases. I did this before I started spray painting, and you're just going to create a kind of like a cookie cutter template. So it creates a circle, and you're gonna need 2 of these. After I cut these out, I rolled them out just a little bit longer so that they were just a tiny bit bigger than my vases. They don't have to be perfect, don't worry about them. Then you want to create holes into your circles. So I just used a pin and poked a hole through the circles. Now you want to make sure that you get the hole through all the way, because once they dry, you want to be able to put a stem in there. Let these dry for at least a day, flipping them over on both sides. These will dry fine just sitting out for about 24 hours. And then once you're ready to put your stems into your vase, you just place these on top of your vase, and then you can add in real or faux stems. Next, I'm going to show you how I created a decorative vase. Now for this project, you're only going to need 2 items. You're going to need a clear vase from Dollar Tree. You're also going to need some of their bamboo skewers. Now you guys, I love these bamboo skewers. I use them in so many different crafts and DIYs, and this is the time of year to pick them up. You can grab them in the smaller size as well as the longer ones. I recommend grabbing a few packs of both of these. I wanted my bamboo skewers to go around my clear jar, so I needed to cut them down. So I was kind of experimenting with the best way to do this. So I laid them out on a board, and I used some frog painter's tape to kind of hold them in place because I was hoping to cut them all at the same size. And I taped them on both sides. I figured out exactly where I wanted to cut them. I laid the clear vase down, and then I drew a line across so I knew where they needed to be cut. Then I used my saw, which is great for cutting like smaller items. Then I sawed through the bamboo skewers. Now, as I was doing this, I was kind of moving them around and my lines weren't straight. And so I cut them about halfway, and I figured that would be okay. For the rest of them, I would just kind of pop them off. Once you create a small cut, you can always like pop them off at the ends. This works well too if you're just doing one of them. You can always cut it at the end and then pop off the excess. Next, I was going to attach my bamboo skewers to this clear jar. I found the E6000 was the best option. You want to put the E6000 on with just a little end of your bamboo skewer so that you're not adding too much glue, because we're not going to be painting this. You don't want a lot of excess glue. So I added a little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom, put my bamboo skewer on. Then I went about a ½ inch and put another one on. I did this all the way around the clear jar. Now E6000 usually takes overnight to dry, so I put some painter's tape really lightly around my jar. I didn't like press it down firmly, and I'm gonna let that sit overnight. The next day I came in and removed the painter's tape, and everything was glued on really well. I styled this on my coffee table with a few faux stems.